Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ksenia. I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. In today's video, I will show you how to fill out the form I-864EZ, which is an easier version of the affidavit of support. So this form's expiration date is October 31st, 2027, and as you will notice, these new updated affidavits of support look significantly different to the ones that we used to have before. We're just going to get started, and I will also be referencing the form instructions to help us in using this form. In order to be eligible to use the easier version of the affidavit of support, you must be able to meet all three of the conditions that are listed in part 1 of the form, and they are also listed in the form instructions. So first of all, you have to be a petitioner for your relative if you have submitted the form I-129F for your fiance, if you file the form I-130 petition for alien relative, and these special categories as well. And you must be the petitioner. So you cannot use this form if you have a co-sponsor. So you must answer yes to this question. Secondly, as a petitioner, you also have to be able to use your own earned or retirement income, which is listed on the form W-2. Although I do have some confusion regarding the retirement income, as the retirement income comes in the form of 1099-R. So the form specifically and the form instructions only mention W-2s. And very often people who try to use their retirement income for the affidavit of support, regardless if you use the EZ version or the regular I-864, almost always receive a request for evidence, which results in them having to resend additional evidence. And we will talk about evidence at the end of this video, and I will also talk about required evidence for retired sponsors. But you should technically have no issues using this form if you are a regular W-2 employee. And one of the things that they do mention in the instructions is that the income you're using to qualify must be based entirely on your W-2s. So that means if you have a W-2 job and in addition to that you also have 1099 independent contractor jobs, or you have any other self-employment income, it seems to me that you would not be able to use this form unless you can prove that the entirety of the income that you're using to sponsor your relative can be met with just the W-2s. So you must answer yes to this question also. And finally, as a petitioner who is using your W-2 income, you also can only fill out this form if the immigrating relative is the only person immigrating based on an underlying visa petition. So what this means is if you are filing the form I-130 and the person listed in the I-130, the beneficiary, is the only person immigrating, so they have no derivatives, then you technically should be able to use the form I-864EZ. Same applies to petitioners who have filed the form I-129F for their fiance and now applying for their fiance's adjustment of status. If your fiance does not have any K2 derivatives listed on the petition, then you can use this form. So most of the time, this form will be used for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, so spouses, children, and parents of U.S. citizens, because all of those people have their own separate petitions filed on their behalf. So if you are a U.S. citizen petitioning two of your parents, you technically should also be able to use this form I-864EZ because each of your parents have their own separate I-130 petition. So if you meet all three of these requirements, you can go ahead and continue using this form. In part 2, provide your information, the petitioner, so your name, mailing address, and answer if your mailing address is the same as your physical address, which means the address where you reside. If your physical address where you actually live and receive mail are the same, you then do not have to provide anything in part 4. But if you get mail at a different address where you live, then provide the address where you actually live. Next, provide information about your domicile. You must be domiciled in the United States to be an eligible sponsor. You can review the domicile requirements on the travel.state website. And as you can see, even if you are the kind of sponsor petitioner who has not lived in the United States for quite some time, you can still prove that you are domiciled in the US by providing one of the following evidences. Next, provide your date of birth, country of birth, and US Social Security number, and your current status. You must show if you are a citizen, permanent resident, or a national. You will need to provide evidence of one of these. Next, provide your A number if you have one. If you were born in the United States or if you acquired your citizenship through your parents, you're most likely not going to have an A number. But if you are a lawful permanent resident or a citizen through naturalization, you should be providing your A number here. And your online USCIS account number. This would apply to you if you have filed the I-130 petition, for example, online, and answer the question if you're currently in the military service, on active duty, yes or no. The reason this question is here is to determine which part of the income requirements you must meet that is listed on the USCIS site. Next, in part 3, provide the information about the person whom you are sponsoring, so their full name and address. In my situation, Jane, the beneficiary, is adjusting status from inside the United States, so that's why her address is the same as the petitioner's address. But if your beneficiary is overseas, then of course you will provide their address here exactly as it is currently. Next, continue to provide information about the beneficiary's country of citizenship or nationality. In this line, write the country of citizenship, the passport of which your beneficiary used for entry to the United States, or the passport of which they will be using if they're doing consular process. So the passport number they put into their DS-260 application, and this would be the country. If your beneficiary is a citizen of multiple countries, you can then use the additional information page, so the last page of this form, to write that they have an additional citizenship. Moving on, provide their date of birth, A number if they have one, USCIS online account if they have one. If your beneficiary does not, you can leave fields blank and provide your beneficiary's phone number. Next, let's calculate the household size of the sponsor. Yourself and the person you are sponsoring would be in line 1. So it automatically should be 2 because you are the petitioner filing for the only relative that you have sponsored in this affidavit, so that should be 2. Then count your spouse if you are married, and again, do not include a spouse here if your spouse is the beneficiary and you already counted them in item 1. You must count your spouse even if they do not reside with you, and you also must count your spouse if you are still legally married, even if you are separated. Also have to count any dependent children you have under age 21. And there is always a misconception and some old school idea that you must only count any underage children that are claimed on your tax returns. This is not what USCIS means. They are expecting you to count all underage children you have, regardless where they live, regardless of their status on your tax returns, and regardless of the custody arrangements that you have. And you should also be counting any stepchildren that you are potentially sponsoring on a different affidavit. If they are planning to immigrate to the United States, you should be counting them here. You must also count any people that you have ever sponsored who are now lawful permanent residents. And this includes the form I-864. It also includes form I-864EZ. The instructions do not ask you to include anybody here whom you have sponsored on the form I-864A. And again, you only have to count these people if they are now permanent residents. If this person you signed the affidavit for is maybe now a US citizen, you no longer have to count them. You also don't have to count this person if they are not yet in the United States. And you also must list any other dependents you have listed on your most recent federal income tax return. So that would include anybody else. Maybe you claimed your parent as a dependent here, or maybe you have an adult son or daughter over the age 21 whom you also claim on your tax returns. You have to include them here and then calculate the entire household size. Now, I always get this question: how come I am able to calculate the household size automatically and you are not able to do it in your form? The only way to make this form editable correctly is by using Adobe Acrobat Reader on desktop, and you must open a blank new unedited form I-864EZ with Adobe in order to then be able to edit this form. Next, proceeding to the employment and income information of the petitioner, indicate if you are employed or retired. If you are employed, provide your current occupation. And, if you have two employers, you can provide them here. And provide your current individual income. If you are retired, provide the date since when you retired. For current individual annual income, this only asks for you to estimate what is your income in the year that you are submitting this affidavit of support. So this number would be an estimate of your annual income between January 1st and December 31st. You can round it up, and as a W-2 employee, it is likely that your income is probably about the same every year. So you can also write a number here, round it up, based on your prior year's W-2s. Next, provide your federal income tax information. It asks you if you have filed your tax returns for each of the most recent tax years. USCIS does technically allow you to still submit your 2023 taxes before the April tax filing deadline. So you could technically count 2023 as your most recent year if you have not yet filed your 2024 returns. If you have, then of course 2024 becomes your most recent tax year, so count from there. So answer yes or no. Let's say in our situation it is a yes. But they do tell you that to qualify, you only are required to submit the most recent tax year's tax returns. If you believe that your additional tax returns from the second and third most recent years will help establish you as a sponsor, then you should also provide those returns. When you provide your tax return information, provide the number that is listed on the total income line as reported on your federal income tax returns. It is not AGI. In some cases, your AGI and your total income will be the same number, but either way, always provide total income. Do not provide AGI. It will get your form rejected, especially if your AGI is different from total income. Only include AGI if you filed the form 1040EZ, but in my understanding, this form doesn't even exist anymore. So in either case, you have to be writing your total income. So this is how we will write it. Provide the tax year on the left and provide the number that is listed in the total income on your return on the right. Now, if for the second and third most recent tax years, your income also met the income guidelines, then you can also include those. Now, if you are not planning to send the tax returns from these years, in that case, in the right side column, write not applicable and /A in pen after you print this form. You also should not be writing tax return information if those tax years did not meet the poverty guidelines, the income requirements. Next confusion that often happens: if you file your taxes jointly with your spouse, the total income line will show the income for both spouses, and you must write it in here exactly as it appears in tax returns, even if, according to this form, you're the only person using your income. So you still must write exactly as it appears in taxes. For this very reason, you will be attaching copies of your W-2s to show which part of that total income from returns actually belongs to you. Also, USCIS does not accept tax extensions, so if you are submitting this form after the tax filing deadline, USCIS will make you provide 2024 returns as your most recent year. They will not accept tax filing extensions. You must file all late returns and provide them with a transcript from the IRS. Another question that I commonly get is, should I provide a tax return copy from my own records or should I send them an IRS transcript? You can submit either, but USCIS does prefer IRS transcripts. You can easily obtain your transcripts online from the IRS website by setting up an account very quickly, and you will be able to download tax return transcripts. If you are sending tax return transcripts, they do technically say in the instructions that you do not have to include copies of your W-2s if you are sending a transcript, but and you only need to do it if you're sending your regular 1040 tax form. However, in experience, it is always best to attach your W-2s even with transcripts, even if you file taxes jointly or as single or head of household. And that is pretty much it for this form. Because this is an easier version of the affidavit of support, you must qualify based on your income only, so there's no additional family members that should be helping you, and there's no assets that you can use for this form. Another thing for retirees, because the retirement income is not taxable, it is likely that the income tax information will not look as what you would expect in the total income line, and that is one more reason why USCIS frequently issues requests for evidence for retired sponsors. Part of it is they simply do not care to investigate further. As soon as they see a number that is listed here that is below the guidelines, they stamp out those RFEs. Now, one of the ways to potentially avoid it is to make it abundantly clear to USCIS that you are a retired sponsor and that your income, as listed in tax returns, is not reflective of your actual income. And the final couple of parts of this form: read the obligations of the sponsor, read when your obligations will end as a sponsor, sign this form. So check the box if you prepared this by yourself and if you understand English, or if an interpreter or preparer helped you, or both. Provide your contact information, and on this page, sign the form. You must sign this in pen. So if you are sending this form to the SEAC portal, you must print out this form, sign it in a black pen, scan it, and upload it. Do not upload the signature page separately. It must be all in one file. So if you used an interpreter, provide their information here. And if you used a preparer, provide their information here. And part 9 is any additional information that you would like to clarify. Let's talk about the evidence required for these forms. As a petitioner who is employed, you must provide the following evidence. Proof of your U.S. status. You must provide, like we discussed earlier, tax returns either from the most recent year, if that is the only year that meets the requirements, or if that is the only year that you're choosing to send, or even better, the tax returns from the most recent 3 years. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, only if all 3 years do meet the income requirements. You also should provide copies of all W-2s related to every tax return that you are submitting. Don't make the mistake of only sending the W-2s because that will result in an RFE. Additional evidence for this form is optional, but it is highly recommended, and that is to provide an employment verification letter from your employer. Another supporting document that is not required but is highly recommended is pay stubs from the past 6 months. As a retired sponsor, the following evidence needs to be provided. Firstly, you should provide a personal statement or a separate cover letter for this form explaining your situation and your status as a retiree. Next, provide proof of your status, as we just discussed. Provide your tax return transcripts if applicable. Some retirees are not required to file taxes while others do. So if you were not required to file taxes, then in this line, you have to write not applicable, but then you do have to provide an explanation on the additional page as well as in the cover sheet explaining why you didn't have to file taxes. Next, as a retired sponsor, you will need to provide SSA 1099 forms, which is the Social Security benefit statements, and or your 1099-R copies. Next, provide a letter from the Social Security Administration verifying your payments and 12 months of bank statements that show these retirement deposits. And if you were in the military and now retired, you will then have to also explain that situation in your cover sheet and provide your military ID and discharge paperwork, as well as your VA ID card and DD-214. If you are a retired sponsor who has successfully used the form I-864EZ, I would love for you to comment below with your experience. I hope that you found this video useful. I hope that you are able to use the form I-864EZ. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos. Bye!